All right, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to work on all different aspects of playing bluegrass guitar, from, of course, rhythm, which we'll talk about why rhythm's so important, but also finding the melody on our guitar neck and building solos and improvising, getting up the neck, particularly through the perspectives of our guest instructors and how they go about doing that. What I'd like to do this first hour is introduce a song to you. You probably already know it, but I want to introduce it to you. And we're going to use this song all throughout the night to serve as the palette, all right, the canvas, I should say, of what we're going to teach. So our goal tonight is not to just teach you this song. Our goal is to teach you all kinds of tips and techniques and tricks and theory that we'll use this song to apply it just in real time. That song is, like I said, you probably already know it. It is The Old Home Place. And we're going to listen to a bit of an iconic performance of this song. Just to, if you haven't ever seen it or heard it before, it's one that you want to definitely put on your list. And I'd like to just listen to like the kick and the first verse and chorus. We'll talk about chords, and then we'll go into finding a melody on our guitars. How about that? Here we go.
It's been 10 long years since I left my home in the holler where I was born, where the cool fall nights make the wood smoke rise and the fox hunter blows his horn. I fell in love with a girl from the town. I thought that she would be true. I ran away to Charlottesville and worked in a sawmill too. What have they done to the old home place? Why did they tear it down? And why did I leave the plow in the field and look for a job in the town?
And we'll stop it right there. Here in a little bit, we're going to go and watch Tony's guitar break, which is very, very similar in this performance, is very similar to what he plays on the record there. And we'll talk about some of the nuances there. And probably, I'm also going to have the tab for you for that break as well later in the night. Let's talk about the actual song structure first. And I want to introduce you to a chord chart. If you've never seen one before, you probably have, but this is a letter chart, right? So this particular song, the way that they're performing it in the key of B flat. So we're going to be playing it out of G position, but capoed up 3. And then they have a kickoff. And you'll notice that these letters here are the actual chord positions that we're making, right? So even though we're in B flat, we're capoed up 3. So when it says G, it's because we're playing a G chord with our fret hand. What's actually coming out of the guitar is B flat because of the capo. Okay, so then we've got C and we've got D and so on. All right, so for the kickoff, it's like a 16-bar kickoff. And I want you to just notice a couple things. These couple extra measures here at the end of the kickoff, and you'll see one actually at the end of some verses and at the end of some solos too. Well, maybe not. Yeah, at the end of the solo. We just refer to those as bluegrass measures. And there's a kind of a historic precedent that's the reason why we have bluegrass measures back when people were using single mics and having to get adjusted to play solos and back in position. But now it's just kind of become a style of the music. Then we've got a verse. Then we have another verse. You might want to look at it as just one verse, but I kind of see it as 2 verses in a row. And then we go into the chorus. Now, there's some chords in here that are outside the ordinary for most of your bluegrass songs. And in our verse, you may see that we have a B chord in the key of G. That's interesting. You might actually call it a B7, because that's mostly what we're going to play, which looks like that. That's 2, 1, 2, open 2. Okay. And then in the chorus, we're going to have a 2 chord or an A chord, right? 2 measures of that. I think it's helpful to actually look at this as well in the Nashville number chart. And that's what I'm going to show you here, and probably what we're going to be referring to more as we go throughout the evening. This is the same exact chords as what we saw on the letter chart, just referred to as numbers. So when we're playing out of a G position, that would mean that the 1 chord is a G. The 3 chord would be that B7, or the B. We're going to make it a B7. 4 chord would be a C. 5 chord would be a D. And then that 2 chord would be a what? An A. Okay. So we have our chord structure here, but it's interesting to see what the solos are built over. Can you tell which chord progression, verse or chorus, is the solo built over? It's built over half of a verse, okay? So let's just listen in again to Ricky's solo, and I'm going to just listen, and I'm going to show the chart to you and just kind of highlight as he plays.
Look for a job in the town.
Now here's all the bluegrass measures.
Well, the girl ran on.
Whenever we're going to solo on guitar, we're going to also take that verse progression, all right? Which means we're dealing with a chord that's not typically in our 1, 4, and 5. We're dealing with a B chord, a 3 chord. So we're going to talk about, me and you, we're going to talk about how we might handle that on guitar. Interestingly, look and see how Tony handles it. He doesn't treat it as a big deal. But there's lots of different ways that we can do that. And as I mentioned before, our goal tonight is not just try to learn a solo to the old home place. Our goal is to learn some concepts and techniques doing this that we can take to any song. And so it's time for me to give you a little bit of my philosophy when it comes to soloing. And I'm a bit opinionated, not overly so, but as I teach, I run into a lot of folks that want to solo. They want to improvise. Absolutely. I'm still learning to do that myself, to get better and better. And what I encourage folks to do first is to think and talk and dwell on the melody of the song first. It seems that a lot of people want to solo or improvise on a song and they have no concept of what that melody is. Does that mean that we have to always play the melody when we solo? Absolutely, it does not mean that, okay? I mean, even as you listen to the New South here, JD and the boys play, they're not playing exactly what the melody is. Interestingly, though, if you listen to the solos, they all start out hinting at that melody, and actually Skaggs' mandolin solo is probably the closest to the melody of any of them. He pretty much sticks to it the whole break. But my point with being able to get a grasp on the melody is that if we don't start with that, if we don't start to be able to connect melody with our ears and then with our fingers, we're just fighting an uphill battle. And what we end up doing is trying to pile a bunch of licks together like Lego blocks and just build solos out of a pile of licks. There are times when that comes in really handy. There are times when I kind of get stuck when I'm soloing and I just grab a lick that I'm comfortable with, that I know will fit, and throw it in there. That's fine. Every guitar player does that. But we need to avoid trying to build our solos to where we're just putting lick number 1 to lick number 2 to lick number 3, back to lick number 1, 2, and 3, and so on. If we do that, our playing will always end up sounding the same. We need to be inspired by the melody to make us play new things. And then we can make that melody more interesting and more robust by using licks too, okay? So we have to start with the ear training portion of it, in my opinion. Like I said, I'm opinionated about that, but I think I'm right. And I think the other guys would agree with me on that. I'll talk with them as they come on and teach. But we want to try to connect our ears to the instrument. Now, whenever I go about teaching this, the first thing I tell people is you have to be able to sing what you want to play. Not that you have to be able to bebop your entire solo like Roger Miller, even though that's really cool. But what I mean is we've got to be able to have that melody internalized in us, right? If we can't at least hum the song that we're wanting to play, then it's going to be very hard to connect that melody to our fingers and to our fretboard, right? So I think when I'm learning how to solo, and if you're wanting to learn how to solo, what I would encourage you to do with whatever song it is of course get the chords. That's why we started with the chords here, and see if you can just hum along. Do, 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 bum, 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 bum. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't have to hum every single little syllable of the melody. Just can you get at that melody? Can you ride along that melody? If you can't, then I suggest that you haven't internalized the melody well enough maybe to play the kind of solo that you're wanting to play. You can still improvise over it, and that'll be fun. I mean, when we go to jams, we're constantly playing songs we don't really know, right? We're just following those chords and doing our best. But we want to reach that next level where when we play our solos for a song, we're giving our own interpretation of a melody that's ours, right? That's ours. And if we don't want to just be lick after lick after lick, so we have to know this melody. So that's the first step. Do, 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 and I'm following the way that Tony sings it, and most everybody tries to copy Tony whenever they're singing it. Now, let's say we can do that. That's step number one. Great. Now, how do we actually find that on our guitar neck? How do we get it from our mouth and in our heart now to our guitar neck? Well, this is where we have a lot of help with something called a scale. And sometimes whenever I say scales, people want to run from the hills. I vow to my students that I don't teach you any scales that you don't ultimately need whenever we're playing guitar, right? And one of the scales that you need is just a major scale. I'm not going to take the time to teach that to you right now because I have lots of resources on the side. But the cool thing about the major scale is it provides, I think about it like stepping stones that crosses a river that's running a fast current, right? If we look at a song or the fretboard like a river, we think, oh goodness, how are we going to get across that? A major scale provides these solid stepping stones that we can jump one to the other and get safely across the guitar fretboard without hitting a bunch of stinkers or getting swept away, right? So whenever we look at our guitar neck, it's not that we have 6 strings and maybe 5 frets that we're working with. So it's not that we have 6 times 5, 30 different options that we can play. We've got them way narrowed down with this scale, right? Because most of our songs, most of our bluegrass melodies are going to fall within the major scale. Most of them. A lot of those even fall within what we call the pentatonic scale, right? Which is 5 of the 7 notes. Now there's some outliers, but we'll find those, and we'll even talk about some of those today, right? But the major scale, 7 notes, and I just played through 2 octaves, so I played 14 notes, right? That's where 90+% of our melody notes for the bluegrass songs that we're wanting to play, that's where they're going to fall. The reason why that helps us is that whenever we go and try to connect our melody that now we've internalized, we can hum, to our guitar neck, we don't have to poke around and say, well, is it on this 1st fret or is it on this 4th fret? No, it's probably going to follow the major scale. Do, 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 do. Okay? Where's it starting? You can just sing the note and find it. Do. I happen to find it, right? Do. Okay, now I've found the note, and I can tell with my ears that I'm humming the note that I'm playing on my guitar. Do, do, do. Okay, where does it go? Well, I'll just play up the major scale. There it is. And it may take you a little while to find that, but here's the thing, and I see my campers and my students do this all the time, because when I first tell them about this, they're like, oh man, what a process this is going to be. I say, well, go and do it 20 times and see what happens. And over the course of even a camp weekend, they'll do it even 4 or 5 times, and then we'll go to start playing another melody, and guess what? They're not guessing anymore. They're starting to nail the melody on their guitar because it's a learned skill. Your ear's starting to connect with the guitar, and you hear that note goes up. It sounds like that note's just not the next note in the scale. Maybe it skips a little bit. Well, I know where the scale note is, so we go up and find it. You'll get better and better and better at this process to finally, you don't have to really think about that scale so much anymore at all. It's just kind of ingrained in where your fingers, you can go and find those melodies. There may be some outlier notes here and there that are outside the major scale, but even those get repeated as you learn various songs. So there's not that many options, right? So let me show you what that looks like with actual tab. I went ahead and found just the basic melody to the old home place as Tony sings it. Now I'm going to try something else here. I've got Strum Machine brought up, and I'm going to play for you this basic melody with Strum Machine playing in the background. And hopefully you can hear both. You can let me know in the chat if you can't. Here we go.
1, 2, 3.
Very cool, huh? Let me do that again while you're watching my guitar.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Can you try to find it with me? What's so interesting about that, I know that I'm not getting all of the little vocal runs that Tony's singing, but do you notice these melody notes that we have open strings, right? The second, third, and fourth strings are open. We're using those. And then the only frets that I played are the second fret on the G string, the second fret on the D string, and we jumped up for one little third fret on the B string. So this melody's pretty basic, right? It's pretty straightforward. And we find that with a lot of bluegrass melodies. And you'll find the more that you learn that, the more they seem to kind of mimic one another, especially the last phrases. You know how many bluegrass songs end with something like this? I mean, those melodies are everywhere in bluegrass. So that's good news to us, because that means when we learn how to attack those, that we've now learned something for lots of different applications, not just for a particular song. Now I'm going to take a moment just to answer any questions that you might have and take a peek at the chat. But after that, I'm going to pull the tab back up, and I want you to get your guitar, and we're going to try playing it together, just along with Strum Machine. Let's see if there's any questions. Is my feed dead? No, your feed's not dead. You just need to refresh your screen. And thank you guys. If y'all see those comments come up in the chat and you're getting a good stream feed and you see that somebody else isn't, if y'all could do me a favor and just tell them to refresh their screen. Very good. Okay. All right. Let's try playing this basic melody together. You want to? I'll throw the tab back up there. We'll go to Strum Machine. You got your guitar. You tuned up to 3rd fret. Here we go.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, Now, when I'm looking at this tab and I'm thinking about this melody, now granted, if I'm sitting in a jam circle and we're playing this song, I'm not thinking about tab, and you're not either eventually. We're just using tab as a communication tool, right? But I wanted to just be very clear that the tab's not going to follow you to the jam circle. We want to use our ears. But as we're thinking about this actual melody and how we're going to get at it with our guitar, good news is there's lots of open strings. And I also detect a lot of areas where we're going to be able to float off the melody and have some fun spots for licks, right? I mean, look at this melody note here. Do, 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 do. It lasts a full 4 beats and into the next measure, right? So we essentially have 2 full measures over a D chord where we can kind of play whatever we want to play before we're worried about trying to communicate any other melody. What happens in real life? Usually people start playing the melody here, communicate that through here. By the time they get here, they start floating. And you know what? As you go through the rest of this one, stylistically, you're not tied to having to play that melody super close. It's up to you. You're the one that's interpreting the song, right? So I tend to want to stay within a melodic boundary and not just go out of sight. If I'm especially if I'm the only guitar player, like in a band situation, and I step up to play a solo for the old home place, I'm going to pretty much play the melody throughout the whole thing. And I'll give you an example of that here in just a bit. But in a jam situation, whatever, you can do what you want. That's what makes your playing yours. Okay, but as we look at this tab, I'm seeing lots of different opportunities for me to embellish and to get some pretty, pick some low-hanging fruit. I'm seeing, again, lots of these open strings. Boy, we have tons of opportunity on guitar, bluegrass style, to do fun things with open strings. We'll see that. Again, I'm seeing a lot of white space in this melody. So this differs from like a fiddle tune, right? I mean, if you're something like, Blackberry Blossom, it's a barrage of eighth notes. So, you improvise on that too, but there's not as much white space. There's not as much freedom to kind of noodle around in between these important melody notes. Whereas a singing song, you often do. Okay, so the first way that I might think about building on this basic melody as a solo, improvising, or at least one way, I should say that, but we'll just do this as the next way, would be to start thinking about the chords that are behind it, to help me build licks, to help me build harmonies, and to make it thicker, okay? So if I'm playing a song that I don't really know that well, but I can kind of get a handle on how the melody's going, I've really got enough to make a solo. I've just got to kind of poke at that melody, and then I need to know, what are the chords doing in the background? That's an important thing to know. So we talked about knowing our major scale. That's kind of a given. And then to be able to know which chords are being played. And when I think about the chords that are being played, we got G, we got the C, the D, we got that B7. We're not worrying about the 2 chord because that's in the chorus, and we're just playing a solo over the verse, right? So we got 1, 4, 5, and that 3 that we're going to think about. So I've got my chord shapes right here. And I think that we all probably know those chord shapes. And maybe not only just the actual shapes that we might play as rhythm, but maybe some inversions too. That's helpful. For instance, here's your G chord, but do you know how to grab a G chord right here? That's just an F chord moved up 2 frets. Cool. We could probably use some of those chord shapes to find some harmonies. When we think about our B7 chord, we might be playing it here, but we might also want to think about B7 as A7 moved up 2 frets, right? So there's our A7. So our B7 moved up would be there, okay? Or you could think about this bar chord, right? Okay, so that's cool. that gives us some opportunities for some harmonies. And then our D chord, not only this D chord, but we might also think about this inversion, right? That's just a C chord, moved up 2 frets. So when I think about all those different inversions, I get lots of opportunity to find some harmony notes. So instead of just playing my melody, I could think, well, what about something like this? So immediately, even though I just played the basic melody, same thing I played before, I started adding in some harmony notes from the chords that are happening in the background. Let me show you an example of that here. So where is our basic melody? They're on the bottom of these, what we might call double stops or dyads. I want you to notice, here's a melody note, 4th fret on the G string. In our basic melody, we grab that same note, open 2nd string. So common knowledge, but in case you don't know it, I want to point out to you that very, very often on guitar, instead of playing that open 2nd string, we're going to grab that on the 4th fret above it on that G string. And we're also going to often slide into it. And doesn't that sound better if we're playing a solo? So we hear that lick a lot, things like that. So if you don't already know to get up to your B note by sliding to the 4th fret, you'll want to do that. So you might just even practice doing the basic melody and substituting in that 4th fret beneath it for the melody. So it would sound like this, or it would look like this. Very, very often do that. But let's look at some of the other chord harmonizations. You might want to play along with me as we look at this. Whenever we get to the B7, what are we doing there? What are we doing? The melody is down here on the 2nd fret. That's actually an A note, right? That's the 7th tone in that B chord. It looks kind of funny when you make it. You're not maybe used to making that chord shape. Okay. And then when we go to C, we're just grabbing the top note of a C chord, keeping the melody beneath us. Pretty cool. And then we just go on through the song. Now, the reason why I point this out is, I mean, I guess you could play a solo all with chord harmonizations. That would sound pretty good. That's more kind of what a dobro does. If we're doing something like I'll Fly Away. Grab an E minor right there, right? So it's very handy, but we don't have to always play them at the same time. Let me throw the tab back up there, and I could play through this and separate out some of these. So for instance, instead of playing these 2 and just letting them ring for 3 beats, I might take this 3rd fret and move it out and play it right here. I might take the 2nd fret, move it out and play it right here. And in that way, we can use our chord tones to provide more notes to fill in the spaces. So we're using those chord tones to just kind of build a background for our melody. And like I say, it might not be the main approach that you take to build a solo, but it's a really good exercise to stay in touch with the chords that are being played behind that melody. Because if you ever get stuck playing a solo, you can always say, always, what chord's being played right now, right? And you can go to an inversion of that chord, whether it has the melody note in it or not, right? You can go there and you can walk between inversions of notes. For instance, we just learned this one for G, 4 and 3. Well, if you slide that down 2 frets, right, that makes a D7. That's constantly happening in bluegrass, either going from a D7, a D to a G, or a G to a D. And then open is back to G. There's a land that is fairer than day. That just came to mind. We can use them all the time, kind of getting that Carter style almost lead guitar, especially when we pair that with what I call melodic improvisation. And that's the next little approach that I want to talk to you about. Melodic improvisation is using the major scale to connect melody notes. Before I do that, we dive in, I just want to look and see if there's any questions here that I need to... oh man, how long was I out? Hopefully not too long. Sorry, guys. The good thing is I have this recorded on my end separately from Vimeo. So if I drop out, when you go watch the recorded version, there will be no dropouts. So that'll be good. Okay. If there's any questions, you can submit those. Wow, a minute. I was out a minute. Okay. Man, that was the most important stuff I said too. I mean, it was mind-blowing. It was one of those things that people just makes them into a great guitar player, but maybe I'll remember what I said. I'm kidding. All right, let's think about melodic improvisation, okay? Melodic improvisation is when we use the major scale to help connect our melody notes, okay? So I'll go back to Strum Machine and I'll just play you an example of that. I have it tabbed, but I'll just play it for you first so you can just kind of listen. And I want you to listen for the melody notes and then we'll talk about exactly what I'm doing. It's important to also realize that whenever we're playing solos and melody, we're not chained, into playing all the melody notes. I've already said that. But we're also not required to play the melody notes right when they fall in time, okay? You don't do that when you're singing. If you think about a song like, if you think about like Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace. Man, that's a high key for me. There's a way that melody is written in the hymnal. But when we're singing that and improvising over that, or if you were to go hear like, if you were listening to Aretha Franklin sing Amazing Grace, she's not going to sing it just like it's in the hymnal. She's going to push and pull those melody notes. It would sound more like this. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saves a wretch like me. I can't do her runs, right? But did you hear what I was doing with the timing, right? Kind of just like Willie Nelson. This is how Willie Nelson made his living, was grabbing the notes and serving them up a little early at times and serving them behind the beat at times. And whenever we're playing guitar, we do the same thing whenever we improvise. This is really good news because sometimes I think we can have a little bit of anxiety whenever we're trying to play a solo, and if we kind of lose our melody in our minds, we think, oh no, where am I? Don't freak out. You can always rely on a scale or a lick to get you through, and then work your way back into the melody, and you might create something really cool. All right, let me play you an example of what I mean by melodic improvisation, using the major scale to connect our melody notes, and then I'll show you the tab for it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Let me try it again. I missed it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So that one's a little different than anything we've heard before. It's more than just the basic melody. I'm not playing really two notes at once. We're not getting any harmonies in there. And it's not that we just do one or the other. All right. I just got a text. Okay. Am I out right now? Let me make sure I'm back in. All right, I'm back. Sorry, y'all. So it's not that we do one or the other, that we only do harmonies, using chord tones, or we only do melodic improvisation. We're going to end up doing a mix of all those things, right? But let me show you what melodic improvisation looks like. And what we want to look first at is the melody incorporated. Yeah, it is. Do, 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 do. So all the melody notes are in there. They might not fall exactly where they were on our basic melody tab, right? But all that I'm doing is I'm using a major scale. Here's here's a melody note right here. Here's a melody note right here. In between, I'm just noodling around on that major scale to help fill in the gaps, right? And there's times where we've got more gaps than others. Now, here's what's interesting. Whenever we have our B7 chord, I know a lot of you are wanting to ask that. What scale would we use right here? What scale would we use over a B7? I don't know that there's really a right answer for that. What I mean is you can use the G major scale, you could use a B major scale, you could use an A major scale. I mean, depending on what kind of sounds you want to get. But a B major scale is really not that far away from like a bluesy G scale, right? So you can kind of borrow from both. And what you'll notice here is that the notes that I chose in this measure are in both a G and a B7 scale, all right? Now, later on, down here in B7, I did something a little different. I grabbed some notes from the B scale that were definitely in the B scale only. So this is a D sharp here, this is a C sharp. And so that made this melodic improvisation here sound very, very, very much B7 and kind of got us out of that G pocket, right? So what's interesting is that when like Tony plays this, and a lot of people play this, it's like they don't even give a passing thought to it being a B7 chord. I mean, Tony does. I mean, he plays just a regular G right down the G major scale, and it sounds perfectly fine. And in fact, that rub with a G major scale over a B7 chord may be exactly what you're looking for. So whenever we have, point being, whenever we have a song that just has one measure, or especially a half measure, but even just one measure of a chord that's outside of the normal key, we don't have to work really hard to throw a lot of credit its way. We can kind of stick around in the key that we're playing. And I do like to throw a bone towards it every once in a while. I like to grab maybe one of those chord tones just to kind of hint that yes, the solo's going over that chord, but it's not absolutely necessary as demonstrated by Tony, right? Okay, so we've learned the basic melody. We've used some chord tones to kind of figure out where our harmony notes are. We've talked about this melodic improvisation, which I have a lot more lessons for that on the website if that interests you. And that's a great exercise. I've got a lot for mandolin too, where we play the melody, but we connect them together with scale notes. Finally, I just want to talk about like adding actual licks. You know, what are we going to do? And the guys are going to take it from here. They're going to go up the neck. They're going to talk about other chord tones and get into maybe some more advanced things. But when I think about if I was just going to actually sit and play this song in a jam and just come up with something on the fly and not play a break that I've worked out before or something that was tabbed out, which is the goal, right? I'm going to find myself doing a mixture of all those things. I'm going to find myself, of course, thinking about where that basic melody is. I'm going to be thinking about what chords are being played behind me. I'm going to have my scale or scales just kind of loosely within reach to help me out if I need to go between melody notes. And then I'm also going to be thinking about where I can put some of my favorite licks in that might help tell the melody's story or just get me through a spot in the song. And then something that Trey's really, really good at, thinking about the legacy of the song, all the people that have recorded it, and paying tribute to maybe what other people have done in the song, which is just a really cool thing to do because it honors their work, but it also, you know, it proves you've been in the music. Like, this is stuff that you know. So, you know, that iconic Tony Rice licks and stuff. You can overdo it. We all may have seen those people. We may be those people. I've been there of just playing Tony Rice lick after Tony Rice lick. But there's times when it's really, really good to throw a Tony lick in there if Tony's known for that particular song and that particular break. I think that's a great thing to do. It's tipping the hat of respect, right? So the first thing I would probably do on this song is instead of walking into it just, it's been 10, I'm probably going to come up with some other kind of walk-in or whatever it may be. And I'm mainly a banjo player, or I used to be, and so I have some banjo influence coming in, something like this. That's exactly what I would do on banjo, right? All right, so you may find some of those that you like. And then when I get into that melody, I find that I'm 99 times out of 100 going to be sliding up to that melody note, because that puts me right in position with that G chord, that F chord that's just moved up 2 spots, right? When I get to the B7 chord, like I said, you can, like Tony, he just did a regular old G scale run, right? But you can do all kinds of things here. You can reach for different notes in that B7 chord. You can play around with some arpeggios and stuff, which we may talk more about today. Or you can do like more of, that's technically kind of a D lick. Okay, so let me actually just play you a version that I wrote up actually this afternoon, and then we'll peel back through the tab, and I wanted to show you a couple things that I was thinking as I wrote it out. And this is pretty close to what I would just sit and play. It's actually harder to read it than not, but I kind of was just playing it and thought about what I played and tried to tab it out afterwards. Here we go.
1, 2, 3.
So there's some Tony influence type stuff in there, as you heard, but I want to point out a few things in the tab just to give you some things that you can apply to any song that you're trying to play. Again, I already talked about the walk-in that I do, right? The melody's still there, sliding into the melody, back down, okay? This is just a chord shape, is all that is. And if you're not familiar with licks that look like that, you're going to be using that all the time on guitar. So again, we're just sliding up to that B note, and our fingers are already in position to do all kinds of great stuff. Okay, so you want to get a hand on that if you haven't done that yet. When we get to the B7 chord, you could mistake this for a D lick, right? And I've used a blues note here. That's technically a flat 5 over a B chord, but it works great. When I get to the C chord, what am I doing there? The melody is still there. As you can see, dun, 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 dun. I have, I don't know, 8 or 10 little C licks that work great for stuff like this. I've got a lesson on the site called Bag of Licks in C. And what we work on doing is taking that C chord shape, right? And just modifying it in all sorts of ways in licks. Okay, all the way from a C run to things like that, little cross-picking licks and stuff. But you've got your E note right here under your middle finger. It's really easy to get either hammer onto it, pull it off, or hammer on from a flat 3 into that major third. And it just so happens that many times whenever you're playing a solo and it goes to a C chord, that your melody's happening right along in there. So you can kind of throw one of those licks in there and help communicate the melody on many, many songs. Okay? One thing I want to point out to you here, look how much space there is. You know, for a long time, I thought that whenever I went to play a solo, that I needed to have 8 notes per measure. You know, I needed to be playing just a barrage of 8th notes, kind of like we were talking about with Blackberry Blossom. The longer I've played, and the more I've been influenced by Kenny Smith, I think, the more space I put in. I see lots of space there. I see space here. I love to see those rests in there, right? And what you'll usually notice whenever I put space and stuff is that I'm also getting syncopated. What do I mean by that? Well, these aren't just 4 quarter notes. I could have, but I held this one and put that in on the and of 2. So instead of, it's just to give a little swing, a little bit of swing in there. Same thing here. Remember on this D chord that melody note lasts all the way through this measure and all the way through the next one. So the melody note is actually the 2nd fret here. I just reinforce that a couple times, and then I have a whole measure to just play something fun. That one sounds like this. Okay. This time, G to B, I did something with a bit of a motif in it. We used that same lick that we learned up top, and then I mimicked it again, except instead of playing a 3rd fret on the top, which was in the G chord, I played a 4th fret, which is one of those notes that's definitely in the B chord. All right? So Ricky actually does this on his mandolin. When he's playing the solo, he goes... And that's what JD does on the banjo too. Right? So this lick sounds like this. And I love that. I love licks that seem like they repeat one another, but then there's maybe just one different note in it that's tipping a hat towards whatever chord change is either coming up or has already happened. A lot of fun. Going back to the tab. Yep. By the time I get here, thinking all the way through, I'm thinking just kind of tony licks, right? That's what I'm thinking, because I've already played the melody, and now we can really just kind of have some fun. That one, starting measure 63 there, is fun. It's just a little different. All right. And that is what I would call just adding licks, right? So just to review, make sure I'm still online here. Yes, all of the tabs are going to be available that I'm teaching tonight, Joe. To review, what we started with was just talking about being able to internalize the melody, sing that melody, find it on our guitar, using the major scale so that we're not having to stab around it where that melody is. We actually had these stepping stones on our guitar neck to help us get there. Be able to hum it. Then one approach you can take is to think about what chords are being played and try to play at that melody using those chord tones. They don't have to be the full chords, but they can just be bits and pieces of the inversions. And we can build some really beautiful solos just doing that, either playing the notes at the same time or separating the notes and creating something a little bit more melodic sounding. Then what we did was melodic improvisation, where we go back to kind of just attacking the melody, but filling in the spots in between them using the major scale, and sometimes borrowing from other scales too. Really great exercise, and like I said, many resources on the site. And then I just built a fun break there to end, just with more licks incorporated, but still getting at that melody. And the thing I want to drive home there is you don't have to get busy with it. Right? You can leave a lot of space, a lot of breathing room. That's one of my favorite things about Kenny's playing is how much breath he can bring in. He can do a lot with silence, which is that's a whole other just a whole other approach, which is really cool. All right.